As I expanded into my own podcast, I thought, okay, well, this will be great. I'll have an audience and people will reach out. Now, that really hasn't happened from the outside, but my own clients, my existing clients that were previously only using us for one service that we have in our portfolio, and they hear something in the podcast and they're immediately interested. They want, oh, I didn't realize that you did this service. Hearing me on a podcast gives me real authority that I didn't have just by sending the email.
Hey there, I'm Sadaf Bainan, and this is Podjunction Podcast, the show where business leaders share how they use podcasting to grow, connect, and build their brands. Today, I'm speaking to Reed Hansen. He's the Chief Growth Officer at Market Surge and a seasoned digital marketing strategist who's helped everyone from startups to Fortune 500s grow smarter, faster, and louder. Reed's particularly passionate about how podcasting integrates into wider marketing systems. And today we're digging into how he helps brands not just get louder, but actually build trust and deepen relationships and drive results. Reed, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm very glad to be here.
Thank you. Well, Reed, as I just said, you help businesses grow smarter, faster, and louder. How does this fit into podcasting and into the bigger growth formula that you have?
Well, podcasting is a great means of getting your message and brand out to a large audience. Fortunately, there's an environment that has a relatively low barrier to entry in terms of what's required of a podcast guest or a podcast producer. And so it's easy to start in that field. So in addition to that, there is a nice culture in podcasting, a generous culture of collaboration and, offers for mutual benefit. As I've attempted to work in the space of getting journalists to write about brands or other kinds of collaborations, it's often with a fee, and it's more difficult to do that. Now with podcast, we can come in and speak extemporaneously, come in prepared. It's just a really quick way to get your brand and voice out there very quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. For you, was the podcasting part of the equation something you did from day one? Was that part of your strategy, or did it come later? What did that look like?
Yeah, it came later. So, as I started my marketing agency, I came at it with my own background of technology sales. I'd worked in the software field and selling agency services. And from my perspective, the formula was cold emails, cold calls, whatnot, the traditional sales outreach, even knocking doors if possible. Now, it was difficult to do that. It was hard to convey in a short message and initial outreach the value that our agency offered or the skills and expertise that we offered. And just on a whim, earlier this year, I started reaching out to relevant podcasts in my field and asking if I could guest and speak about some success stories that we'd had. And from there, I kind of embarked on this journey of getting a series of guest opportunities. I found that this was actually a fairly easy and repeatable process that I could undergo to get guest spots. And then after a few opportunities as a guest, I decided to start my own podcast. And so I found I had a great source of guests, people that had hosted me on their podcast, clients, extended network, and quickly turned into my highest performing channel. And I can talk a little bit about that too, if you'd like, but it has really transformed our business.
So I'm really curious, what was it that made you think, actually, I could do this myself? I don't need to guest anymore.
Yeah, and I'll say I still pursue as many guest opportunities as I can. Because I do find that very valuable. But I think what sparked was the many podcasts that I guested on. I found that there were many practitioners that had just embarked on a podcast. They weren't necessarily particularly skilled, and I don't mean that in any negative way, but just they were focused on producing and doing it on a regular basis. And, and I noted that I do have a tendency in conversation to ask a lot of questions. I like to listen more than I like to talk. And so I found that that lends well to a podcast conversation. I'm great at thinking of conversation questions, and I prompt people, and then I use some tools like ChatGPT and Jasper and Gemini to help me structure a conversation, and with some prompts and some inputs on their background in business. And like I said, it can be a very repeatable, efficient process.
Yeah. And have you enjoyed that learning process or has it been something that's a bit of a mix? What's it like?
Well, absolutely. It's funny. I do get the numbers and analytics on the number of subscribers and downloads. And, frankly, I'm not topping the charts on many topics. And so I'd say that the value that I'm getting has been with the actual contacts I've been making with these guests. Yeah. And so I've learned a ton. I've been exposed to software tools and marketing processes that I hadn't been familiar with before. And, I'm engaging in kind of a cold first meeting with a lot of potential partners or potential clients down the line that, it's just like a format that is like a sales process, but it is just so much more warm and productive, I would say. I think to answer your question, the learning process, I gradually have been acquiring better equipment, like, external mics and external cameras, and I have a light shining on my face, and probably need another one. But so I've been experimenting, and I think by nature I'm a little bit of a tinkerer. I do like to try new tools and toys, and so I do enjoy that process. And using the software, and each time I can identify process, like the editing process for the podcast. Each time I can identify it, I'm always trying to like systematize it so I don't have to spend as much time on it. But, so it's kind of like it's an iterative process, and I'm getting better and better.
Yes, I totally agree, and I think it remains an iterative process. I think because there's always so much to learn. You said it too with what you learn so much from your guests as well. I think the whole process really adds to you, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
You mentioned earlier that your podcasting, your podcast is one of your highest performing channels. Is that in terms of trust building or lead generation, or is there more? I'd love for you to expand on that.
Yeah. Surprisingly, when I initially thought this will be great. First the guesting, I was like, this will be great. I will get leads from the audience of the podcast that I'm guesting on, and didn't happen at first. And then, as I kind of expanded into my own podcast, I thought, okay, well, this will be great. I'll have an audience, and people will reach out. They'll find me on the directory, and then they'll reach out. Now that really hasn't happened from the outside. I'm not saying it can't happen, but I have also been posting my podcast links to the podcast snippets in highlight form to a newsletter that we publish each week. And I have been getting my own clients, my existing clients that were previously only using us for one service that we have in our portfolio. And they hear something in the podcast, and they're immediately interested. They want, I didn't realize that you did this service, or I didn't realize that SEO was as important as it does. Like, they're actually listening to this, and they see, and I'll say, like, we've been sending out the newsletter for a long time, and all of a sudden seeing me on screen or hearing me on a podcast gives me real authority that I didn't have just by sending the email. And, and possibly it was just a format that it was a better way for them to learn, and or just more engaging. And so the real value has been increased authority in the eyes of people that I'm already working with. And, so that's been tremendous.
Yeah, it is absolutely tremendous for that. I completely agree. Yep. I'm curious so before you just had email, and then you started the podcast, you've got the reels or the snippets, you've got the newsletter. Are you, how do you make that work? Do you record the podcast and you use snippets from that, but then is the newsletter an extension of that podcast, or how do you format it?
Yeah. So we do 3 newsletters, and one is a general newsletter that we just send to everybody in our database. A lot of it is updates on marketing in general. And if I do a podcast on a general topic, I will post a link to that or snippets inside that newsletter. And then we have a couple industry specific ones that, when I do an industry specific podcast, then we make it applicable there. Like I said, the newsletter had been in existence, and we had been filling it with items from our blog and occasionally an infographic. But enriching the newsletter with the podcast content has really increased the open rates and the click rates, and like I said, I'm getting great response from existing clients.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
What are some real world results, if you don't mind sharing, that you've seen when podcasting is paired with a strong marketing system?
Yeah. So, I've started working with a few of my clients to help kind of replicate our own process to get podcast guest opportunities. And they have found that, it's funny, I'm kind of a generalist as a marketing agency, but a photography studio that I'm working with has been getting a ton of guest opportunities. She focuses on a very niche genre in photography, and it's funny. I'm just getting a text notification. She just texted me. She said, "Thank you so much. I have had 61 podcast guest opportunities since we started 2 months ago." Wow. And so it's been a real value. And I think just because she has some very specific experiences and something that are that many of the women's entrepreneurship community and photography community can learn from. And so when we found like kind of the niche that was great for her, it just really took off. But she has been seeing from a results standpoint, she is, she can only shoot in her studio locally, but her reach as a podcast guest is all over the country, and she's seeing increased traffic to her website, which we're able to track, and we can gather additional contacts and put those into her other marketing pipelines. So.
Yeah, no, that's really good. I love what you're saying, because I think often the expectation is that once I get a podcast up and running and it becomes my marketing arm, the ROI is just, going to be amazing. And it doesn't always translate like that. There's like you said, the authority building and the networking. There's so much more that it can do for you and enrich your business with.
Yeah. One learning I had, I was experimenting with the format, and, my first few, I interviewed some members of my team just to get some content out there. And those did fine, and they were well shared. And then I thought, okay, I'll do a solo one where I'm just me talking. It's scripted, and it will be titled AI 101. Now, my dear mother, who is always like my fan and cheerleader, she told me, she gave me some hard feedback. She said, "You know what? That was your worst podcast," and I was like, "Oh, interesting." And so. I've kind of abandoned that format, but like if I actually look at the numbers, it was the title of that podcast was AI 101, Demystifying AI for Small Business Owners. And it is by far my most popular download. People will open the podcast page and they'll scroll down to that, download it. I mean, I have like hundreds of downloads of that episode compared to like, the dozens that I can get from these others. So
Yeah.
it's interesting. Sometimes the feedback you get doesn't match the numbers, and so you do have to continue to experiment and iterate.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. You do. You do. I think sometimes we can stop doing one thing too early, haven't given it enough time.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What other learnings have you had?
Well, so there's a lot of details to manage. At first I wasn't sure, how important it was to add the additional data in the show notes and the title. So I was kind of looking to some of the podcasts that I subscribed to and really enjoyed, and so I experimented with the format. First it was like, I'll just put the topic of the podcast. And then I thought I'd try just the name of the podcast. And then, I found kind of a combination of the two is the best way to get people's attention. Also really important to promote the download, because even if you have subscribers that get automatic downloads, you still should be very deliberate about both sending preview posts about your appearance and also follow up where you post snippets and highlights. And it's important to send to create these snippets because and particularly in video on these posts, those seem to resonate the most, or at least the algorithm seems to like those the most on like LinkedIn and Facebook. And then that content is really all you should do on Instagram. You can't really post links in Instagram in a nice format. But Instagram and TikTok, those are so valuable. So the value of those short form snippets is kind of what drives the most downloads and subscribers, it seems like.
Yeah, no, that's good. I find those some of the most tedious things to do in the whole podcasting process.
Absolutely.
But I agree, they do help build that momentum and drive traffic. Yeah, I agree. But yeah, it's hard work sometimes trying to fit those extra bits in.
Yes. And from one of the, I'd say more accomplished podcasters I had a guest appearance on, which I haven't done, but I know he does and has had a lot of success with, is he does follow-up podcasts where he comments on some of the discussion podcasts. So just him speaking in a scripted way or very structured way about a topic that was raised on the podcast. And so he combines his good content that he had from the guest with his own expertise and is able to even further establish himself as an authority in that area.
Yeah. No, that's great. Have you had any surprises either from running the show or helping clients launch one that reshaped your approach?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say from a surprise standpoint, it's been interesting that different podcasts have different approaches to onboarding. So in some cases they ask for an introductory call before we do our guest appearance to frame it out. And some ask for me to provide questions that they will ask me on the podcast, which can be helpful, or they produce their own questions that they send to me in advance. And I've actually found that to be a good practice, that I send a rough outline of questions that we can do. I don't, so I've learned from that it helps them know what direction I'd like to take it and what kinds of stories I'd like to get from them. And so that preparation of the guest is valuable. I don't necessarily need the preview call. I think, a text back and forth is fine. I guess I'm dreading the day that somebody comes on and has a particularly like grating personality or has like some sort of opinion that I like just can't tolerate, but that hasn't happened yet. And I've been able to dance around a lot of things. Although sometimes a couple times I've talked to people that brought up very inflammatory political topic on the podcast that was just kind of just as an aside, and I'm like, whoa, boy, I'm not touching that, and what's the next question? Hard to prevent that. That wasn't in the show prep, but I generally think that's a good practice to avoid very divisive issues on the podcast. Politics and religion.
Politics, yeah, for sure. I think it's good practice because you prep them to be their best on your show, right? And that's what you want. You want to bring value to your listeners and also to them as a guest. So I think that it makes so much sense. We have a couple podcasts, and for this one, as you know, because I'm talking to other podcasters, I don't really feel the need to have to prep them. Right. So it's just like, let's just jump on and record. Whereas there's other ones where like, let's just have a pre-call. Let's just see where you sit and make sure that that they're a fit for the show.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And that's a good guideline. I think most of the guests I've been having that are coming in as somewhat strangers are podcasters themselves. So I think that does give them a lot of, at least experience in having a on-screen conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Reed, what do you think or what's something business leaders often underestimate when starting a podcast? What would you say?
I think the time required for editing and doing the post-production tasks, I would say it's quite a bit more difficult than I expected and time consuming. I've been trying to outsource it to my team, and it has been a little bit of a challenge. I picked it up and I've been doing it for a few months now. And, the first time I had a member of my team do it, there was an error, and it was actually it was a glitch on the software. And I had seen that before, and I knew how to restore a backup and, merge the recordings. And, so what I had explained to her that it would be super smooth and super easy was not the case. Now she's intimidated and doesn't want to do it. And so, but yeah, that can be time consuming. And, there's a lot of variables. Like, I'll have guests that say like, oh, I'd like to re-answer that question. And so that has to be edited out, or there will be, pauses, or, they'll say like, oh, I'm not sure how I answer that. Can we just cut that whole question? I'll sometimes get that. And so those are things that it feels like I can do it, but my team is still learning. And then, the other task in post-production is creating the rich posts and the snippets. And you need somebody with some skills to do that, and some time. So Yeah, I mean, AI is good, but it doesn't do everything for you. Right. Yeah, and like I said, it'll improve, and but it does need a human touch. And yeah, I agree. I mean, I think AI is great, but I think it's only as good as or as great as the prompts you give it. Yes. So you still need to know where you're trying to get with it. Absolutely. Yeah, and that's exactly right. And I use a platform that has some AI that helps with editing, but fortunately it just shows me what it would edit, and I check yes or no. Yeah. But it's often incorrect. It's often like, I want to keep that. It's not as simple as just turn it on and it does it all for you. Yeah. Unfortunately. Yeah. Reed, can we just go back a bit to what you were saying about prepping your guests and, talking about getting value for your listeners? How do you make sure that your podcast isn't just content, but also a relationship building tool with your guest? Yeah, that's a good question, and something that I am evolving on. I've made a lot of these connections through LinkedIn, and it's nice to like officially link up on LinkedIn and be able to follow their career progress and any updates that they're posting and see other podcasts I like and follow. And so, I do my best each podcaster guest to follow their podcast as well and tune in when I can. And I try to make it a practice to leave a 5-star review and help as much as I can. And so it really, and I understand that there are people that are expert in this, in turning podcast guests into potential clients or partners. I don't know that I've really landed on the pure process on how that's done. But I do see this as at least the start of a long relationship. In a few cases, I have talked to people that said they'd like to revisit a business relationship in a few months. And so there's some potential there. There's like an opportunity in the pipeline with a few of these people. But I'd like to be even more methodical about this and be able to get to the, how we can work together more efficiently. I do like the format because I have a ton of information about them, and we've had like a real human conversation. So those things are a great start. It's no longer a cold communication each time I reach out to them. So, I think there's a lot of potential there.
Yeah, no, I agree. And thank you so much for sharing that and for being so candid with it. I think, as you implied too, that podcasting is the long game. It's not, you don't get results right away, and you're still quite early in your journey as well. And I've had guests on the show that have said, it can take up to 3 years for things to really start going and you start seeing real results from it. So I agree. A lot of potential.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's just like a friendship, you never know when you'll work together. I've just, started working with a college roommate from 20 plus years ago.
Wow.
I've taken him on as a client for my marketing agency. And so like, you never know when a relationship turns into potential business partnership. It doesn't have to, but it
could.
It's good to have friends.
Absolutely. Yes. Reed, what would you say is next for Market Surge when it comes to podcasting and growth strategies?
Yeah, I'm actually enjoying this cadence. I'd worried that I'd get tired of podcasting or bored, answering the same questions. It doesn't seem to be the case. I found it just a great vehicle for continued networking, and I expect that as both our client base grows and the reach of the podcast grow, that I'll see increased opportunities for the business. And so I'm kind of taking a patient approach where I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing and try to make each podcast a little bit better, and iteratively improve. And I'd expect more good things to happen, and maybe the fruits of podcast 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 start to bear fruit in later this year.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think there's a lot to be said for consistency. I think you're absolutely right. Just carrying on. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Reed, for business leaders who are thinking about starting a podcast, what's one shift in the mindset that you think you need before diving in?
I think maybe somebody that is diving in might expect to see some instant results, or see like every podcast generate a sales conversation. I would look at a long tail of measurables in your podcast. So, there's so many things to measure. There's your subscribers, your downloads, your the number of podcasts produced, your rankings on different podcast directories, but also just make note of anybody that references your podcast in conversation, or people that share it on social media, and just keep kind of a loose note of every interaction that people are having, so you can identify like, oh, okay, that shared post turned into a sales conversation with somebody that didn't have anything to do with the podcast itself. But I'm starting to observe my LinkedIn business page subscribers are growing, or my Google business page, is getting more views, and these are some, or even my SEO is improving. So, these are all factors that can be driven by putting yourself out there. And so stay consistent. It's a long game. Don't stop after, a few podcasts when you haven't, seen instant ROI. Just know that these conversations, it's a relatively low barrier to entry, and just consider it a networking exercise until it bears fruit.
Yeah, I like that. Consider it say that again.
Consider it a networking exercise until any of the tangible benefits start to show themselves.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you.
You bet.
Reed, this has been so much fun. It's been packed with insight. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here and really glad we connected.
Awesome. Reed, before you go, though, if someone wants to connect with you or learn more about Market Surge, where should they go to do that?
Great. The best place is our website, marketsurge.io, and I can be reached at my email at reed@marketsurge.io, and that's REED. But yeah, delighted to talk to anybody. If you think you might be an interesting guest on our podcast, I would love to speak with you. In addition, if you are interested in talking about your business to me, I will take any call I get.
That's awesome. Thank you, Reed. And to those listening in, thanks for being here, and all the links that Reed has just mentioned can be found in the show description. And if today's episode has sparked some ideas about how podcasting could fit into your own growth strategy, I hope it's given you a new angle to explore. Thank you for listening, and bye for now.